Today, we're talking about something important, something many of us find hard to face, something that often happens when we meet someone and the relationship begins. Because at first, everything feels magical. The excitement, the connection, the texts, the glances, it's all new. And precisely because it feels so magical, it can also become a trap. Not necessarily because the other person is bad, but because we make mistakes. Mistakes we repeat. Mistakes we've learned. Mistakes we often justify as just part of love, when really, they're not. If you want to build something healthy, something real, something truly good, you have to start recognizing these mistakes, calling them by name, and most importantly, stop falling into them again. So, take a deep breath. Stay with me. No rush, no pressure. Just listen. 1. The mistake of idolizing too soon. You meet someone, and before you know it, you're already painting 1,000 pictures in your mind. The trips, the shared apartment, the late night conversations, the intimacy, but you're not in love with the person. You're in love with the story, and the story hasn't even happened yet. That's dangerous, because the more you idealize, the less you actually see. And the less you see, the greater the risk of choosing based on fantasy instead of reality. Projection isn't love. Projection is filling the other person with what you're missing, and no one can play a role that was never theirs to begin with. To idealize is to close your eyes, but real love requires eyes wide open. 2. Giving yourself away too quickly. Another common mistake, giving too much, too fast. Your time, your energy, your attention, your body, your priorities. Let's be clear. I'm not saying don't feel. I'm not saying don't open up. I'm saying take your time. You don't truly know someone in 2 weeks. Relationships aren't built on chemistry alone. Desire can blind you. And when it fades, you crash. If you give yourself away before you know who you are, and before you really know who they are, you're not choosing from freedom. You're reacting from a need. And where there is need, there is risk of dependency. And where there is dependency, you risk losing yourself. So feel, but don't hand yourself over too quickly. Real love doesn't rush. It moves with truth, and truth takes time. 3. Confusing attention with love. Someone texts you every day. They listen to you. They want to be close. They dedicate songs, send cute messages. It feels good. It feels real. But be careful, because attention isn't always love. Sometimes it's affection. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's care. Sometimes it's control. Don't just pay attention to the gestures. Pay attention to the consistency. Pay attention to whether they show up when things get hard. Because real love doesn't just exist in pleasure. It shows up in fear. It shows up in respect during conflict. In care, even when there's disagreement. Attention is easy. Intention and consistency, that's what matters. 4. Losing yourself. One of the most painful mistakes. You slowly start to disappear. You give up your space, your routines, your friends, your passions, your goals. Everything starts revolving around the relationship. We'll do what you want. I give that up because I'd rather be with you. I don't talk to my people anymore. I'm with you now. At first, it looks like devotion, but if you're not careful, it becomes self-abandonment. And no one, absolutely no one, is worth losing yourself for. If you have to trade in your identity just to keep a relationship alive, then that relationship is costing you too much. A real partnership doesn't ask you to shrink. It invites you to grow. It doesn't close the door behind you. It opens new ones. Real love doesn't lock you in. It sets you free. It opens you up. It doesn't make you smaller. It helps you grow. So if you ever begin to feel like you're losing yourself, pause, reflect, and ask, is what I'm building here really worth more than who I am? Because there's no love more expensive than the one that cost you yourself. The silence that destroys. Another mistake so many people make, often without even realizing it, is staying silent about their feelings just to keep the peace. You swallow your pain. You tolerate what hurts. You smile even while it aches inside. You think, better not say anything. I don't want to ruin the moment. I'll bring it up later. Maybe I'm just imagining things. Maybe I'm overreacting. But let me tell you something. Anything you stay silent about out of fear of losing someone will eventually lead you to lose yourself. And at some point, the bill comes due, because what you don't say builds up, and what builds up eventually explodes. Silence has never been a solid foundation for true connection. Silence is only powerful when it's chosen freely, not when it's imposed by fear. So speak. Speak with kindness. Speak with clarity. Speak with honesty. If something hurts you, say it. If something bothers you, name it. If something doesn't feel right, express it. You are not being too much for saying how you feel. You're being honest. And honesty is the only language real love understands. The illusion of I'll change them. Before we close this first hour, I want to leave you with this truth. Never enter a relationship hoping to change someone. Don't begin with, he'll grow out of it. She'll get better over time. No, don't fall in love with potential. Don't love what you hope for. Love what is. Because if you love someone hoping they'll change, you're not truly loving them. You're gambling. And love is not a gamble. Love is a choice. A clear, conscious choice to accept someone as they are. And to ask yourself honestly, does who they are align with what I truly need? That simple. That hard. Breathe. Everything we've talked about is not theory. It's life. It's what people live through every single day. Your friends, your parents, your children, you. At some point, we've all lost ourselves in the name of love. We've all made mistakes, but we can all choose differently. And that's what matters. That you're here today, listening, reflecting, waking up. That's the first step toward loving better. You're still here. And that says something about you. It says you're not settling for old patterns. You're no longer willing to do the same things and expect a different outcome. It says you want to learn, to grow, to love more truthfully. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me walk with you for a moment on your inner journey. Because when we start a relationship with someone, we also begin a new relationship with ourselves. The cost of adapting too soon, one of the quietest but most common mistakes at the beginning of love, is adapting too quickly to what the other person expects. You start adjusting your words, toning down your personality, hiding opinions, making yourself smaller, just so they won't leave. But hear this from the heart. If you have to stop being yourself to make someone stay, they're not staying with you. They're staying with a reduced version of your truth. And that becomes exhausting. It drains you. It erodes you. It breaks you slowly from the inside out. Healthy love doesn't ask you to disappear. It invites you to be fully seen. True connection happens between people who show up as they are, unfiltered, unafraid, unapologetically themselves. Because trying to please is a trap. It's easy to be liked when you're performing, but the real courage, the real value, is being loved while staying true to who you are. Speak, even when it's hard. One final thing, because it matters deeply, don't stay silent just to avoid conflict. Don't stay small just to keep things smooth. Don't think, maybe it's my fault. Maybe I'm too sensitive. I don't want to mess this up. Because when you suppress your truth, you stop living your own life, and what remains unspoken doesn't vanish. It transforms into fear, into anger, into sadness, into quiet, corrosive disappointment. Speaking your truth is not the problem. It's the path. It's how you make space for yourself. It's how you set boundaries. And a relationship without boundaries will eventually overflow and collapse. You weren't made to stay quiet. You didn't come into this world to make others comfortable at the expense of your inner peace. You are here to be yourself. And if you have to stop being yourself just to be with someone, then that is not the right place for you. Love is not anesthesia. One of the most common traps at the start of a relationship is using it as emotional anesthesia. You come out of a breakup, a loss, an emptiness, and without even realizing it, you start something new, hoping the other person will fill all those holes. And for a while, it might feel like it's working. But eventually, everything you haven't healed comes back. It seeps into every conversation, every argument, every insecurity. Because no one, not even the kindest partner, can carry what you haven't dealt with yourself. A partner is not a therapist, not a shelter from your own pain, not a cure for your wounds. A partner is a companion, someone who walks beside you, not someone who replaces the inner work only you can do. So if you feel like you're reaching for love, the way someone reaches for a painkiller, pause, breathe, return to yourself. Because if you don't heal first, you'll end up using someone else to cover what you really need to face. And no one deserves to be used as a rescue mission, forcing what isn't mutual. Another mistake, one that often disguises itself as love but is actually fear, is forcing a connection that isn't mutual. You try, you call, you wait, you adjust, you overextend, you shrink yourself to hold something. The other person isn't holding at all. They don't commit. They don't open up. They don't grow. And yet you keep trying. Here's the truth. When you give more than you receive, you begin to drain yourself. And once you're empty, you start begging for crumbs. A call, a text, a sign, anything. But that's not love. That's emotional hunger. And when you're starving, you'll accept anything, even what harms you. That's why it's so important to say, stop, to say, this far and no further, to choose yourself, even when it hurts. Because every time you chase someone who isn't choosing you, you send a message to your own worth. I'm not enough. And that will break you eventually. Stay with the one who chooses you, the one who shows up, the one who builds consistently without leaving you questioning your value. You don't have to convince anyone to love you. Real love doesn't need to be proven. It is visible. It is present. It is undeniable. Loneliness isn't a reason to stay. Another quiet mistake many of us make is entering a relationship simply to avoid being alone. And as human as that is, it's a costly mistake. Because when you choose someone out of fear, you're not really choosing. You're settling. And when you settle out of fear, you start normalizing what isn't good for you. You justify. You endure. You go silent. And slowly, you begin to disappear. But being alone is not a punishment. It's a space to meet yourself, to gather yourself, to ask, what do I really want? If you can be alone, you're not ready to be with someone else. Because even in the healthiest relationships, there are moments of distance, misunderstandings, and silence. And if you can't face those without losing yourself, you'll fall into emotional dependence. And that is just another kind of prison. So choose connection from wholeness, not from emptiness, from freedom, not from urgency. And you will see everything changes. Because when you choose from fullness, you stop accepting less than you deserve. Breathe. Stay in the silence for a moment. Feel what this stirs in you. Maybe it brings up a memory. Maybe it makes you think of someone. Maybe it shines a light on your own patterns. That's okay. That's good. Because you are not alone. We've all made these mistakes. We've all fallen, stayed too long, or given too much. But not everyone chooses to learn. You are. You're here. You're listening. You're waking up. And that already changes something inside you. We're still here. You and this honest search for a better way to love. And not just to love another person, but to love yourself. Because even when we don't say it out loud, every relationship reflects your self-worth. It reveals how much you value yourself, how much you're willing to endure, how much you're willing to let go, and how ready you are to choose yourself, even when everything in you wants to hold on. So let's keep going today gently, without rushing, but also without standing still. There's a mistake many people make, often without realizing it, entering a relationship without knowing their own boundaries. And here's the truth. If you don't know your limits, everything begins to overwhelm you. You accept hurtful words. You tolerate troubling behavior. You go along with a kind of love that doesn't feel right. And then you wonder, why do I feel so empty? The answer is simple. If you don't know where your inner peace begins, you won't know when it's being violated. Setting boundaries isn't selfishness. It's self-worth. It's emotional health. It's active self-love. When you don't set boundaries, you slowly break apart. Because in trying to preserve the relationship, you stop listening to your own voice. And one day, you wake up and no longer recognize yourself. So ask yourself, what are you no longer willing to tolerate? What behaviors will you stop justifying? How far are you willing to walk alongside yourself? And where does it become self-betrayal? True love respects boundaries. Healthy love hears a no. Mature love isn't offended when you draw a line around your emotional space. Validation isn't love. Another draining mistake, especially at the beginning of a relationship, is constantly seeking validation from your partner. Do you miss me? Did you like it? Are you thinking about me? Are you sure about us? There's nothing wrong with having insecurities. We all have them. But when your self-worth depends on what the other person says or does, you'll find yourself on an emotional roller coaster. If today they say they love you, you feel good. If tomorrow they're distant, you unravel. That's not love. That's not stability. That's emotional fragility. And fragility like that isn't healed by someone else loving you more. It's strengthened by you doing the inner work. Because when you know your worth, you don't need to hear it all the time. You know it. You feel it. You live it. And then you don't need to chase. You don't need to control. You don't need to check phones, overthink texts, or question every silence. You feel secure because you trust. And if you can't trust, then this may not be the right relationship for you. A relationship without trust is like a house with no foundation. You can decorate it beautifully, but eventually it will collapse. Unrealistic expectations. Now, I want to talk about something deeper. Something we often struggle to admit. Unrealistic expectations. The ones we carry when we believe that someone else will finally fill everything we've been missing. With this person, I'll finally be happy. Now I'll have real stability. This time, I'll be loved the way I've always needed. And yes, longing for good things is natural. But when you expect someone else to be everything for you, you forget yourself. No one is coming to complete what you haven't resolved within. And if you expect them to, you'll end up blaming them when they can't. And trust me, they won't be able to. Not because they don't care, but because they're only human. They can't read your mind. They can't feel the space only you can feel. They were never meant to. Going into a relationship with impossible expectations is like handing someone a heavy backpack that was never theirs to carry. And that's when frustration begins. Disappointment, resentment, arguments that go nowhere. Don't place your happiness in someone else's hands. Don't hand over your emotional well-being to another person. A partner can walk beside you, can enrich your life, but they should never become the center of your universe. Because when everything revolves around them, what happens when they're not there? What happens when they don't respond? When they fall apart, do you fall with them? So start building your own foundation. Build your peace. Build your clarity. Build your self-trust. And when someone comes along, let them add to your life, not replace something in it. Love isn't something you earn. Another painful mistake many people make, often quietly, often without realizing it, is believing they have to earn someone's love. So they give too much. They give their time, their energy, their attention, their whole self, without expecting balance or mutual care. They convince themselves, if I just give enough, they'll choose me. If I'm good enough, they'll finally love me back. But love isn't earned by overextending yourself. It isn't won by sacrificing your needs. It isn't proven through self-abandonment. Real love is not a prize. It's a meeting of two people who see each other fully and choose each other freely. But love doesn't work like that. Love that must be begged for is no longer love. Love that has to be earned soon becomes humiliation. And you were not born to shrink yourself in the name of love. Don't make yourself small just to be chosen. Don't give yourself away to someone who doesn't value you. Don't justify behaviors that deep down you know you don't deserve. And above all, don't confuse passion with love or intensity with true connection. Some people know exactly how to make you feel special. They know the words. They know the timing. They know the gestures. But that doesn't mean they know how to stay, or how to care, or how to love. Some gestures may feel deep, but they have no roots, no commitment, no intention to remain. And you have to learn the difference. Because if you don't, you'll keep falling into the same pattern. Someone appears, fascinates you, then disappears. And if it happens enough times, it begins to erode your trust in others, in love, in yourself. So pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, is what I'm experiencing nourishing me or draining me? Does it strengthen me or weaken me? Is it walking beside me or leaving me feeling alone, even when someone is physically present? Because there are no half-truths in love. If you have to ask whether someone loves you, they probably don't. Love reveals itself. Love is felt. Love proves itself. And if it isn't clear, it simply isn't there. You're still here. And that means something. While many people choose to forget, distract themselves, numb the ache, you've chosen to face it. That, even if no one else sees it, is an act of tremendous courage, because not everyone dares to question. How do I love? How do I connect? What wounds am I carrying? What patterns am I repeating? So thank you for listening, for being present, for your willingness, for your courage, the fear of being alone. Today, I want to talk about something quiet, but something that shapes many relationships. The fear of being alone. In the beginning, it hides. It wears the mask of excitement, of instant connection, of this is everything I've ever wanted. But if you bond out of fear, you're not truly choosing the other person. You're running away from yourself. And if you use someone to escape, the connection will eventually start to suffocate you. Not in the romantic sense, but in the deeply unsettling kind, the kind that makes you feel more anxious, more insecure, more dependent. And it won't be the other person's fault. It will be because you never learned how to be with yourself. Being alone is not a punishment. It's an opportunity, a pause, a season of renewal. If you run from it, if you feel the emptiness with anything, just to feel something, you'll end up throwing yourself into relationships out of desperation. And anything born out of urgency is bound to end in pain. The fear of being alone makes you blind. It makes you endure the unacceptable. Say yes when everything in you is screaming no. It makes you idealize people who offer nothing real. And so the relationship becomes a kind of anesthesia, but one that doesn't heal, only numbs. It creates silence and leaves you more broken than before. So if you're alone right now, use it. Don't rush to feel the silence. Don't chase companionship just to avoid yourself. Seek yourself. Listen to yourself. Watch yourself. Because the more you learn to be with yourself, the better you'll know who you truly want to be with. Red flags are warnings, not mysteries. Another mistake, one that needs to be named, is ignoring obvious red flags because you're afraid of losing someone. Those strange messages, the distance, the shifting tone, the silences that didn't exist before. You notice them, you feel them, but you choose to look away. Why? Because the idea of losing them paralyzes you, because you'd rather hold on to a beautiful lie than face a painful truth. And I get that. The fear of loss can feel like falling into a void, like nothing else will ever come after, like your whole world will collapse. But let me tell you something gently and clearly, it is far worse to lose yourself, just to avoid losing someone else. When you ignore red flags, you abandon yourself. You silence your intuition. You dim your light. You trade clarity for confusion. And that is not love. That is self-deception. Because true love doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't make you feel anxious every day. It doesn't have you searching for reasons where none are given. If you have to convince yourself that everything is fine, it's not. If you're constantly justifying what, deep down, you know is unhealthy, there's already a voice inside you whispering, this is not the right place. Listen to it. You don't need more proof. You don't need more time. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of what no longer makes sense, even if it hurts, even if it's hard, because staying while you're slowly dying inside is also a kind of pain. But it's the kind that breaks you silently, little by little, until you no longer recognize yourself. And you were not born for that. I also want to talk about something subtle, but just as dangerous, the romanticization of toxic behavior. Those familiar phrases, he's jealous because he loves me. He gets angry when I'm out with others because I matter to him. He controls me, but it's only because he cares. No, that's not love. That's control. That's insecurity disguised as concern. That's emotional dependence wearing the mask of romance. Love does not imprison you. It doesn't stalk you. It doesn't demand your passwords. It doesn't check your phone. It doesn't ban your friendships. It doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't silence your voice. Love lets you breathe. Love gives space. Love respects your autonomy. If you're in a relationship where you can't be yourself, where you constantly feel watched, guilty, afraid to speak up, where you have to ask for permission to live, that is not love. That is fear. That is manipulation. And no one should ever call emotional abuse romantic. Because I promise you, there's love without shouting. Love without psychological games. Love without punishment or silence as a weapon. There is love without drama. But to receive that kind of love, you have to stop idealizing what hurts you. And that begins with you. It begins when you stop confusing intensity with depth. When you stop believing that suffering is a sign of passion. When you stop thinking that someone who truly loves you would ever let you hurt that deeply. No, someone who truly loves you, cares for you, respects you, stands beside you without destroying you. And that is exactly what you deserve. Another common pattern in early relationships is the urge to merge too quickly. doing everything together, talking all the time, sharing every detail, letting go of routines, neglecting your friends, abandoning your own world to orbit someone else's. And yes, in the beginning, it can feel magical, inseparable, like you finally found your other half. But be careful. Love should never erase you. It should never turn you into someone else's shadow. You have your own life, your own dreams, your own pace, your own path. And if a relationship asks you to give all that up, you're not growing, you're dissolving. True love doesn't demand fusion. It asks for a connection that respects your individuality. Two whole people choosing each other without losing themselves in the process. The best kind of we is made when two strong eyes stand side by side. So if you find yourself forgetting who you are, just to keep a we alive, pause, return, come back to yourself. Because if you don't have yourself, no one else can truly have you either. You're still listening. And that's not a coincidence. That's presence. That's commitment. That's a genuine desire to grow, to love better, to choose differently. And that is priceless. Because when you choose this path, the inner path, the one where you reflect on how you love, how you connect, what you tolerate, what you avoid, you're already changing. And once you begin, you can go back to who you were, even if the process is painful, even if it reopens old wounds, it's worth it. Because on the other side of that pain is freedom, clarity, self-respect, and a love that feels safe. Today, I want to share a story with you, one that stayed with me, not because it was dramatic, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was real, because it was human, because it was painfully familiar. His name was E, a quiet man, reserved, hardworking, the kind who doesn't speak much, but feels everything deeply. He had just ended a 7-year relationship. 7 years, not because everything had fallen apart, but because one day she simply left. No big explanation, no long goodbye, just silence. She walked away, and he was left standing in the wreckage of something he thought was still intact. He hadn't seen it coming. He didn't understand. He couldn't make sense of it. And as so often happens, instead of grieving, instead of pausing, instead of healing, he tried to forget. He met someone new, young, intense, free, seductive. In his words, the complete opposite of my ex. And of course, she captivated him. She lit him up. She made him feel alive again. She gave him the illusion of rebirth. But something was off. There was a strange silence between them, an emotional distance he couldn't quite decode, a constant push and pull. She gave him something, then pulled it away, again and again. It left him confused, trapped, desperate for her validation. 5 months passed, and he was no longer himself. He stopped seeing his friends. His performance at work declined. He couldn't sleep, always clutching his phone, waiting for a message that never came. In our first session, he said, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I know this isn't good for me, but I can't let her go. I can't stop, even though I know she's not good for me." And that sentence, my friend, that sentence sums up so many stories. Knowing something is hurting you, yet being unable to walk away. Being trapped in a feeling that isn't returned, that pulls you in but doesn't protect you. That excites you but doesn't respect you. That makes you feel alive and yet completely empty inside. We worked together for many months. It wasn't easy. He had to face the things he had spent years avoiding. His fear of being alone. His belief that he was worthless unless someone chose him. The deep-rooted pattern of constantly feeling inferior. And he cried. He got angry. He doubted everything. But then, one day, he understood, not just in his head, but in his body, in his bones. She never loved me. She only used me to avoid being alone. And even though it hurt, even though it shattered the fantasy, he could finally breathe. It was like his body had finally let go. Because sometimes the greatest act of self-love is simply saying, stop. And that's what he did. Not because he stopped feeling, but because he finally started choosing himself. He began protecting himself. He stopped betraying himself in the name of love. And that is emotional maturity. This story is just one of many, but it shows something very clearly. You can feel deeply. You can have chemistry. You can experience intense desire and still not have a healthy relationship. Because what makes a relationship healthy isn't how much you want someone. It's how well you protect yourself while being with them. If you have to beg, it's not the right place. If you have to stay silent, it's not the right place. If you feel fear and anxiety every day, it's not the right place. If you can't sleep peacefully, it's not the right place. If you constantly wonder whether you're truly loved, it's not the right place. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for what is essential. You're asking for respect, presence, clarity, consistency. And those things shouldn't be luxuries. They should be the foundation, not the roof, but the ground beneath your feet. After going through all these deep, honest, and sometimes painful truths about love, relationships, and your own worth, one thing remains crystal clear. You deserve peace. You deserve a relationship where you don't have to shrink yourself just to be loved. You deserve a love that doesn't hurt, doesn't confuse, doesn't break you apart. Not a love built on conditions, games, or manipulation, but a love that stands calmly by your side. A love that sees you, all of you, and doesn't ask you to change. In order to be accepted, maturity doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you know what to do with those feelings. It means you know when to stay and when to tell yourself, it's time to go. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for having the courage to face yourself, to look at the places that hurt, to not give up on loving better even after everything. And no, it's not always easy, but it is possible. And every time you choose yourself, every time you refuse to settle for crumbs, every time you draw a boundary, every time you say no to what breaks you, you begin writing a new story. And this time, that story begins with you.